So a lot of people in corporate roles will do a lot of prep on the message, as in putting PowerPoint slides together, most commonly, and not as much prep in the delivery of that message. So all of that work on the message is extremely important, and you should put just as much time into delivering that and practice it out loud.
Welcome to Future Fit Leadership, a podcast for leaders at every stage who want to stay relevant in a world that keeps changing. Leadership has shifted. The pace is faster, the expectations are higher, and the future is calling for a different kind of leader. One who is human-centered, grounded, and able to balance capability with empathy. These conversations bring together global perspectives on the skills and mindsets that help people and organizations thrive. Hello and welcome to Future Fit Leadership. I hope wherever you are listening to this podcast, you are well. Before we begin, I want you to think about a moment when a leader stood up and spoke and you felt it land. Not because the words were clever, not because the slides were beautiful, but because something about the way they spoke made you listen differently. You remembered it later. And maybe, just maybe, it shifted how you thought or acted. That is the difference between delivering information and actually landing a message. And that's exactly what our conversation today is about. My guest is Carmen Sederino, founder of Illuminated Story and someone with one of the most interesting career paths I've come across. Carmen didn't begin her career in boardrooms or corporate offices. She started on stage, trained in theatre, performance and storytelling. She understands something many leaders are never formally taught, that leadership communication is not just about what you say, it's also about how you use your voice, your body, your presence, and importantly, the energy you bring to the people who are listening to you. After spending close to 2 decades in senior leadership roles inside large organizations, Carmen saw this gap. The gap between the message leaders intend to deliver and the experience people actually have in the room. Today, she works with CEOs, executives, and senior leaders to help them communicate with clarity, confidence, and credibility. In this conversation, we talk about executive presence and why it's not about being louder or more polished, why PowerPoint has quietly taken over far too much of our leadership voice, and why the leaders who will cut through in the next decade are the ones who understand how to blend performance, storytelling with authenticity. So if you lead people, influence decisions, or carry responsibility for communicating change, this conversation will resonate. Please enjoy my conversation with Carmen. Carmen Sederino, welcome to Future Fit Leadership. Looking forward to our conversation. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
So you've had a really unique career journey. When I was doing my research on you, I realized that you actually started on stage before you went into the corporate world. Tell me a little bit more about that. That's not a usual career transition.
It's certainly not. I'll take you right back to the very beginning. So believe it or not, even though I was on stage, I was actually a very shy child, and my mum enrolled me in calisthenics when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I think. And I liked going each week and doing the practice and rehearsals. And then a concert came up, and she thought, there is no way that Carmen is going to get on stage and stay there. So she was sort of waiting in the wings, waiting for me to run off crying and catch me. But as it turns out, I got up on stage and I was waving and smiling and dancing and absolutely having a ball. So fast forward a few years, we moved towns, and she actually told me there was no calisthenics in the town that we moved to because she didn't want to have to drive me around and do all the things that mums have to do.
Yeah.
But I found a local theatre company. So I was about 8 years old, and a local theatre company started up in the town. So I joined, and it was amazing. I did 1 to 2 productions a year with this theatre company. And at one stage, I don't actually know the mechanics of how this happened, but I remember that the whole school watched our production. So I must have gotten the day off to be able to perform in the play. And my teachers would say to my parents, "Oh my goodness, I cannot believe that is Carmen up on stage. She's the shy child up the back of the classroom, just quietly does her work. And then she's up on stage with this big voice and this big character, and we just can't believe it's her." So even though I was very shy, there was something about the stage and performing that allowed me to be a different person up there and have the confidence to get up and speak in front of people. Fast forward a lot of years, and I decided to formally train and get a qualification in that area. So I did a Bachelor of Performing Arts at Monash University. And within that degree, we obviously focused a lot on acting and on stage and stagecraft, but we also learnt behind the scenes. So we learnt stage management and lighting plans and sound and how to control the desks and all the things that had to happen behind the scenes to make the production as amazing as you see it as an audience member. I also studied acting for camera during university. I did a separate course at night time to study that craft. And when I finished, I ended up doing my honours year. So I did a thesis that involved me writing my own show, producing it, putting it on, acting in it. I did have a cast as well, and I brought in an extra director at the end to direct me. And then I had to write a thesis on it and why I made all the choices. Why was the set like that? Why was the lighting like that? Why were the characters doing what they were doing? And so that's really relevant to how I help thought leaders today, because I help them take their traditional keynote speaking and blend strategically placed elements of theatre into it to make it a keynote show, which creates an unforgettable performance rather than what I call a standard keynote. Sometimes, which you may have experienced, can be a little bit boring or challenging.
Communication is such a critical part of leadership, isn't it? Because if you get it wrong, then people don't connect with you. If you're boring because you're just not engaging the audience, people don't remember what you've said. And it takes a real art form to get up on stage to communicate a vital message to your audience so that they connect. And quite often it may be the vision of the business, a transition that you're making, a crisis that you've had. Could be a whole bunch of reasons while you're up there.
Absolutely.
And so communication is critical. What do you think? Like your background is really interesting because you've done all the groundwork as such to be able to say to someone like me who leads an organization, when you get up on stage, this is how you need to perform. What are some of the pivotal moments that come to your mind that you think have shaped not only how you communicate, but how you teach leaders too?
Great question. So I'm gonna take you to the other side of my life to answer that question, because that was all of my performance background. I then spent 18 years in a large corporate business.
Right.
So, when I'd finished my degree, I was working part-time for one of the largest homemaker companies in Australia. And they said, "Can you work full-time for us?" And I said, "No, I've got to keep my day free for auditions." And she said, "Well, I will let you go on auditions when your agent gets them if you work full-time for us." So I was like, "Great, okay, great deal." And she let me do the small jobs I got and all the rest of it, because I really wasn't someone that was willing to just waitress at nighttime and keep my days free. I was very driven, and that would have actually killed me, I think. So I did that, and within a couple of years, I was really bored selling on the shop floor. And I said, what else could I do in this company? And so I got put forward for a state role where I would visit all of the stores in Victoria, train them on customer service, sales, merchandising, any imported products that we brought in ourselves. It was our job to train them. So it was me and one other lady. A couple of years later, I became the national manager of that team. So I led a national team. We bought into New Zealand. So I had people across in New Zealand. And I would create a lot of the training programs that would get rolled out nationally. And then I would coach my team to deliver them. And they were really mini general managers of the areas they looked after, because they would help the store managers recruit. They would give advice on hiring, firing, training, coaching, and then, of course, how to generate more business. And they'd help go out and attract what we used to call account customers. That would be regular buyers within that business. So I studied marketing, and I got a formal qualification in that, because even though my team did a lot of training and there was a training department in this business, we sat under the marketing department. And I was always like, what's next? What's next? So I thought I better get a marketing qualification. And to come back to your question, I was a bit embarrassed, to be honest, that I had a Bachelor of Performing Arts and I didn't have a proper business degree. But in reflection, me moving my way up through that company and taking on leadership roles, it was so much to do with the skills that I had learned in my performance background and experience that got me into those roles, that helped me empathize with people, lead people, obviously, as you said, stand up and deliver. So when I'm working with CEOs, MDs, I work with a president of one of the biggest sporting codes in Australia at the moment, a club, not the president of the whole code. I think that you can get so when you're a leader, you have to protect yourself in some ways. You're told to be vulnerable, and yes, there's parts of you that it's good to show that. And there's also parts that you probably do need to protect. So being able to help leaders tap into what is available to them in certain circumstances, like if they're delivering a big town hall, or if they are invited to be an expert speaking at an industry conference, to let themselves go a little bit and just show them what is available within their voice and their body language to be entertaining, while delivering a really important message at the same time.
We quite often hear the phrase executive presence.
Yes.
When you talk about leadership, what does that mean to you, and how would you describe a leader to embody, or how would you encourage a leader to embody that?
So to me, executive presence, there's a calmness about you. Obviously a strength as well, a calmness and a strength. So if I know that some people will be listening and some people might be viewing us right now. As I'm talking, I'm sort of putting my shoulders back and lifting my head up, and I call it filling the space I was intended to fill. So often when you're up in front of people, if you're feeling a little bit anxious and vulnerable, and I don't care how amazing you are as a leader, I've worked with so many, these circumstances can make you a bit rattled. They can make you feel anxious, and that's okay. That's really natural and normal. So how do you still look like the leader that you are in those circumstances? And I think that's what I think of when I think of executive presence. So still being able to be calm, in control, warm, if that's your style. I think that's a great style to have, but warm with strength behind you. And that'll be in, obviously, the message. I think the message is exceptionally important. So getting those words right and the positioning of your information right, so that you are persuasive in whatever it is you're getting across. And just as equally as important is how you're holding yourself with your body, your facial expressions, your appearance is important too. And your voice. So how is your voice coming out? What type of strength have you got coming through in that sound?
Because quite often when you're nervous, your voice is the first thing that goes, and either goes really high, or, you start to get croaky. It's happened to me many, many times. You get the sweaty palms, and you forget where you are in your speech, etc. What do you see as the biggest communication blind spot? Like you coach a lot of leaders. Is there a thread that runs through a blind spot around the communication piece?
So I think there's two things from a day-to-day point of view. You just in the business, in the office, I think it's not understanding that everything you do is communicating something. So if I think of an example, I remember once someone who was my C-suite that I reported to when I was in the business I worked for. He was amazing, and he would often in meetings be on his phone while the meeting was happening at the same time, which I think a lot of people do these days. We're always multitasking.
Is that not being present in that moment?
Not being present. And for me, it wasn't a problem because I was quite senior too, and I knew him well, and, you know, we worked closely. But I'd overheard some graduates. So this was like a big WIP meeting, work in progress, monthly meeting. Everyone has to present where they're at with their projects. And it's a fairly big space. There's probably about 40 people in the room. And to me, it was nothing. But I overheard some grads saying how nerve-wracking it was for them every month, and that they would stress about that, you know, they had to present in front of everybody. And this one lady was presenting this day. She was presenting a big work that she was doing, a big project. And I happened to be sitting next to him, and he was on his phone, and I knew that she was
You could see him.
approval for this. Yeah. And I just sort of nudged him and I said, "Oh, have you already heard this presentation?" He's like, "What?" I said, "Oh, have you already heard this?" He's like, "Oh, no." And he put his phone down. And listen, now he was not wanting to communicate, "I don't care about what you're talking about. This is not important to me." But that's what he was communicating to
message.
her just by being on his phone.
Mm.
So I think that's one thing for leaders to be mindful is, what is your non-verbal communication saying that you might not even mean it to say, that you're not thinking it's saying? And then if I go the other end of the scale back to sort of that conference setting or that big town hall, you have to have more energy and presence up there than you do in a small meeting room or a conversation one-on-one. So you might have to feel like you're being too big to look really natural and normal up there, to be interesting and not be sort of flat and boring when you're up there.
What about when the stakes are really high? So, you know, you're in the big town hall kind of environment or a boardroom meeting. And many leaders face this, you know, particularly in a climate at the moment where there is a lot of turmoil and headwinds coming our way. So, you know, many of us may be in boardroom meetings or town hall type environments where the stakes are high, or we have to deliver a message, a non-negotiable or a high stakes message that needs a lot of clarity. What's your advice to leaders when you are presenting under pressure like that? Because that's when probably everything that's going to go wrong is going to go wrong in that moment.
Preparation. So rehearsal, not just, so a lot of people in corporate roles will do a lot of prep on the message, as in putting PowerPoint slides together, most commonly, and not as much prep in the delivery of that message. So all of that work on the message is extremely important, and you should put just as much time into delivering that and practice it out loud, because when you practice something only in your head, it sounds great. And as soon as you go to say it out loud, it sounds different. It's kind of like that same effect as having a microphone and hearing your voice back. And so what often happens, if you haven't practiced out loud enough, you will put yourself off with your own voice, and it can all go downhill from there. So yeah, preparation, practicing out loud of the actual speech, and then preempting. So really thinking hard about what are some of the, if you're going to open up for questions to your people or to the board, well, I'm sure that you wouldn't have an option with the board, then think about what might they ask you, what might they really challenge you on, and how might you respond to that. So really working through, I guess, that objection handling section and thinking through how you're going to respond in those moments.
What about the off-the-cuff commentary? Because quite often you get put into situations where you've got to be really good at the off-the-cuff commentary, and particularly when you're being interviewed by media, you need to be able to do that. And the mix of the gravitas and the humour. How do you teach leaders to do that really, really well?
Improv. So doing lots of improvisation training behind the scenes is really important. Look, I'll be really clear. I'm not a media trainer. I think that's quite a different skill set to what I do, mainly because the media will cut you up. So you've got to really practice what you're going to say, knowing that it can be cut up in different ways and potentially taken out of context. So that's not something that I work with leaders on personally. In those moments, though, when you're in real life and, you know, in the board meeting or in front of your people, I think, look, obviously honesty is really important. take a breath, like take a moment to think. It's okay to pause. It's okay for there to be a moment of silence for you to reflect and truly think. And I believe that actually gives you a lot of credibility, because people will see that you're really thinking through and considering what they've asked you and what they've said before you respond. And, you know, as a last resort, it is okay to say, if it's a question that's just really thrown you, it is okay to say, I have not considered that question, and I think it's a really important one. So I'm going to go think about it and come back to you on that.
I like that, because quite often that will, no, not quite often, but when that does happen, it actually works in your favor to be able to say that to whoever you're presenting to say, I'll come back to you on that. I want to shift gears a little bit and move to the power of storytelling, because we hear this quite often about, you know, if you want to land your message in a crowd or, you know, whoever you're speaking to, that there is the power of storytelling is critical when you are delivering a message. How do you bring that into your presentation or into a board presentation or into a town hall meeting as such? How do you do that?
Well, what I normally get people to do is, when they're crafting their whole talk, speech, presentation, think about the key points first. So I use a post-it note process. It sounds really old because it's not using technology, but I actually find it helps leaders think, because it takes them away from a screen for a moment. So
I like
first
that.
of all is, you know, get the structure, get the core message out. Don't worry about your stories. Then once you've got that, and that's really clear, because I think you've got to be clear, confident, compelling. They're three key pillars that I work to. That's when we overlay it with relevant stories. So, and it can be your personal story, relevant personal story. Some people just tell stories because they're told to tell stories and they're not relevant to the point, and that's not helpful for you. So relevant personal stories, but you can also use stories from your team, or you know, the world. If there's something that's happening in the world at the time that's really relevant, and can even be used as an analogy, for instance. So sport can be used often in business, and when the Olympics is on, it could be really relevant to talk about something that's happened there. Or, you know, if it's Melbourne and it's AFL season and you're in the type of business that responds to that, then maybe there's something that's happened recently that ties into business that way. But I think it's really important first to get those core messages right, and then think about overlaying with a story. If it can be your personal story, then I think that's really powerful, because sometimes we go to everybody else. So we'll, you know, draw on a famous book that's been written, and then people are hearing the same sort of quotes over and over, but they probably haven't heard your personal story before. So they're waiting to hear what comes next. And I think it's important for leaders to remember that when you're storytelling, your audience will suspend belief to listen to the story. Like, they're listening. If you're just giving them facts and data, it's our human natural instinct to pick holes through that. So as soon as you're going down that path, we're thinking, oh yeah, well, when was the report run? Or, you know, when was this, and how many did they survey? And, you know, are those stats
I do that all the
actually
time.
correct? But when it's a story, like, oh, what happens to the character next? And so, you know, and so they're getting the whole message to the end. And it's much easier for our brains to remember it. I think the stats are still saying about 65% of what you say is remembered when told as a story, versus about 5% when you speak in data alone.
What's the biggest issue that leaders have to not share their personal stories? Because it is a moment of vulnerability and it's not easy to do. So what are some of the key issues, and then how do you overcome it?
This is where I guess you've got to make a choice. I was in this really interesting workshop recently called the Theatre of Life workshop, where they were looking at theatre and leaders at the same time. And they were saying that you're always in a one-person show, because you are in your own show as an actor. And then you're also a director in that show, because there's different elements of you. So you might, you know, I like to say that you might go to the football, for instance, and you might yell and scream at the players and the umpires and use these big voices, and but then you might be in church and you might be using a quiet voice and be very still. And so as a leader, you've got to bring out the strong person, you've got to bring out the empathetic person, the relatable person, the person that goes to the board and maybe is a bit more formal. And so I guess it's choosing what you want to share with the people that you're speaking to. And when I say tap into personal stories, you do have to feel comfortable sharing it and be ready to share it. So if I think about some leaders I've worked with, there was a MD who was speaking at a conference or opening, a conference that was raising money for people that had committed suicide, basically. And it was within the mining industry. And unfortunately, he had a friend that had committed suicide. And he said, I could use that story. And I said, yes, that would be a very relevant story to use if you're ready to share it. Because if you break down up there, you're not going to come across the way you want to, and you're not going to have the cut through that you want, like for your purpose of why you're there. Now, we worked together and he decided he was ready, and he was, so that was great. And there's other times where I've seen people try that in rehearsals with me and they have broken down. There's been other people in the room and they're not ready yet. So you've just got to choose, and that's an extreme example because I know we're talking about someone dying in that instance. You got to choose whether you're ready to tell the story. But I would say, I mean, people like hearing that you're human and they love hearing when you've made mistakes. So if you're willing to share some of that, I think it does make you more appealing and more likable, because we like, people that have come back from failure and that are standing up in front of you having won, if we want to call it that, at the end of the day.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I was just looking at some stats, and I think I might have got this off your website, where there is such a challenge where 73% of men and 75% of women have a fear of speaking in front of groups. In fact, they would rather die. That whole quote of "I would rather die than speak," which I find hilarious, because you want to be lying in the box rather than doing the eulogy. I just think about that for a moment. I'd rather be doing the eulogy than lying in the box. It's crazy.
Seinfeld did a whole skit on that. He did a comedy skit exactly on what you're saying years ago.
How do you get people to shift that mindset? Because it is a mindset, and it's just this common phrase we use, "I'd rather be dead than speak." How do you shift that mindset for people?
Yes, it is. It is 100% a mindset. So I talk to them about mindset a lot. So the first shift is, and this is a standard line that you've probably heard before as well, it's not about you, it's about your audience. And when you think about theatre, that is 100% true. The whole play, everything to do with that play, which takes a lot of time to put together, has 100% been designed for the audience and their enjoyment or excitement or intrigue. So as the leader, think about the fact that, and this is a line, there's a man that works in sales who gets me to work with him sometimes, and he says, people are mildly interested in you and absolutely fascinated in themselves. It is just human nature, okay? So when you're up there speaking, your audience is filtering that through their own lives and experience. They're not really thinking about you. They might be thinking about what you're saying, but they're thinking about what you're saying in relation to them.
Would they do that if they were in the same situation? So that's the filter that we use potentially.
Yes. Yeah. And how's it going to help me? So if you're making a change to the way the company's doing something, well, how does that affect me in my role? How does it affect my life and my family? Like that's what the audience is thinking. So I think when you go up there thinking about the fact that you're giving a gift to the audience, because you should be up there for a reason. There should be a message that you really need people to hear if you're up speaking. So you're giving that gift to the audience. It's about them, not about you. That is a huge mindset shift for a lot of people. I think I think it's Simon Sinek that says, okay, so if I told you had to get up in front of, 10,000 people on stage, and your message was to tell them that they'd all won $1 million, would you feel nervous about that? Probably not.
I'd be excited about it. Yeah, I'd be
So,
going, we're all, you can all go home, stop working.
So if you think about the fact you're up there to give an important message, and I know that it's not always roses, so I know that leaders sometimes have to get up and give pretty challenging messages to the business and the group. It's still an important message for the audience to hear, and obviously, depending on the circumstances, will depend on how that gets delivered. And then there's, of course, a lot of things that you can do to prepare your body to help you either use that energy or calm yourself down before you get up there, because it's your flight or fight reaction happening, which is sending a whole lot of adrenaline through your body, and you need to use it or calm it down.
Can you share some easy ones with us?
Yeah, definitely. So to use the energy, think about being an athlete for a moment. So, 30 deep squats in the toilets just before you go into that meeting could help. If you're sitting in a meeting room, I think it's really hard sometimes when you've got to speak, but you're like 5 speakers deep and you're in the meeting the whole time. So even just clenching your fists underneath the desk, because you don't want anyone to see you doing these sorts of things, can help use some of that energy. From a calming down point of view, a really great breathing technique, and this should be done leading up to a big event. So do it for days. Breathe in through the nose for 2 counts and out through the mouth for 6 to 8 counts. The longer the better, but don't pass out. So you got to train your body to get longer. Maybe start with 6. It's a very calming breathing exercise, and when you're practicing it prior, you're training your body that when you're doing this, you feel really calm. So that in the moment when you're not feeling so calm, you can do that, and your body's like, oh, that's right, I feel calm when I do this. It's like muscle memory. And it's something that you can be doing in those situations. If you're sitting around the boardroom table and waiting for your turn, no one even needs to know that you're doing it, and you'll be able to be doing that technique.
I use that a lot. And it actually does work. And I do it every time I get into a board meeting or before I go up on stage, and it just centers me to what I need to do and really calms my nerves down. So anyone listening, absolutely, it does work. Let's talk about the digital communication, like you and I doing this on Zoom. And, for our listeners who can't see you, you've got your camera on, you look lovely, your energy is jumping out at me through the screen. And leaders these days, more and more so, are doing these types of meetings on Zoom. I run all my board meetings, bar 2, for the year via Zoom. And it does require a certain level of energy and connection, because people have short attention spans. It's easy to go flick to emails. It's easy to check my phone messages. It's easy to text people. So how do we make sure that online session is engaging and energized and we connect with people?
Yes. It's so true. It is a very well-used medium now, and it is a different skill set. So one key tip is make the camera your friend. So a lot of people will say to me, I know I'm supposed to look at the camera, and there's a lot of leaders just working off laptops. So it's a little green dot on the top of your laptop. I know I'm supposed to, but it's really hard because I can't see what's coming back. And, you don't gain any energy from the audience in these settings often because you can't see them. Or, they're not, yeah. So it is definitely more challenging as the presenter. And I think, again, this is a mindset and a discipline thing. You've got to forget about that and put in your best performance, basically, and trust and know that when you do it with energy and you do look at the camera, that it's coming across really well on the other side. So you've got the highest opportunity for people to be engaged and be retaining what you're saying than if you're not. And think of the camera as a person as well, because people get really challenged by staring at, like I'm staring at a camera that is on a tripod right now.
Yeah.
And And so that feels like you're getting eye contact on the other
It
side.
does. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Whereas if I'm sort of staring down here at the screen, it's not as effective. It doesn't hit you. So think about if you're in person, you want to be making a lot of eye contact with the people that you're in the room with. This is the equivalent. Staring down that camera barrel is the equivalent of being in the room and making sure you're making eye contact with various people. Make sure
And
your background is
yeah,
relevant. So it's got to match your business brand and your personal brand. And I don't mean that you have to have branding all over the screen or background or anything like that. It just needs to be professional as you want your business brand and personal brand to be. I know it was a long time ago now, but during COVID, the dress standards fell. Like, I don't know why it was okay. So I work with lawyers as well. It was all of a sudden okay for a lawyer in person would be in a suit, but on screen would be in their activewear. And it gives you a completely different impression
so
of
true.
the person, even if they're saying the same words. So be really mindful of how you show up. Show up in the equivalent way you would in person, to the point where it can be helpful. And I do this, I'm not today, but I have a standing desk. So if I'm running a virtual workshop or keynote presentation, I will stand up because I would do that in real life. I would be standing up in real life, and it gives you a different energy. Like your own energy is different, and therefore the way that you're coming across down that camera is different too.
How would you manage people if you're in a small enough meeting, if you notice that they are, playing on their phone and doing messages and stuff? How do you manage that? Like if you're running a team meeting and somebody isn't paying attention because they're being distracted, and you don't want to call them out publicly because that creates a whole other challenge and issue as well. But how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I think there's two things to that. If you're the leader, first of all, prior to these meetings, you need to set standards around virtual meetings. And I know there are many businesses that have, for instance, a camera on policy. So I would talk openly to the team and say, hey, if we were in a meeting room, what would you expect of you and your colleagues? And so we need to expect the same things online. If you're actually in the meeting, then using the chat box can be very helpful to create engagement and actually ask questions. So again, in person, if you're in a meeting and someone's doing that, you'll often ask a question and try and engage the room in that way. It's the same online. You just have to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more structured in your instructions of how you want that to happen. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. I'm going to give you a moment. I want to hear from everyone in that chat box, and I'm going to give 2 minutes for that to happen, and then let's go through each response. And what I'd love to do is actually get you to take yourselves off mute so that you can take us through what you've written. So straight away, everyone's like, oh, they're expecting an answer from everyone.
Yeah.
We're going to have to take ourselves off mute and engage, and we need to type into the chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
AI, everyone's using it now. I don't know how many speeches ChatGPT has potentially written for leaders out there. What's your advice on that?
Look, I think AI is an amazing tool, and you should definitely embrace it and use it because it saves time. And we're all looking for more time in our lives. I use it too. Don't let it do all the work because it's not you, it's not your brain. So let it make things faster for you. Absolutely. It's great for getting the initial speech out and playing and challenge it. So say, I want it to sound more like this, or I want it to sound more like that, or what if my audience? So remember your audience if you're getting it to help you with speeches and presentations. My audience is more like that. So can you change the wording to suit that type of person?
Yeah.
And then go back through and just shift it slightly, correct it, add your human touch to it, because that's what will set you apart from everybody else that might not be doing that. I actually had a client attend a rehearsal workshop once, and I was just working with 3 leaders. They were all in charge of their own companies. and two of them had created their own speeches and they'd actually practiced it, and so they were pretty good when they delivered it. This third person was running off notes on his phone still because he hadn't rehearsed his speech, and he just had all these words. It was like okay, he thought it was the best speech ever. So everyone was being very careful with their feedback in the room because they'd flown in from different states, they didn't know each other. And then eventually we found out that he'd gotten ChatGPT to write it as he drove in to the workshop.
No.
And he was so impressed with what ChatGPT had. But the feedback from the room, and it was good because it wasn't just me. So as a speaking coach, I'm like, this just isn't right. But the other two were like, that didn't even know him really well, said it just doesn't sound like you. Like it just doesn't feel like you're really giving us those messages. So even though he thought the language was amazing and it had come up with these cool kind of concepts that he was talking to, it just didn't feel right. So you've got to be really careful to do the final edit.
Good advice. Last two questions for you. What's an outdated piece of communication that we use that today we should leave behind?
Am I allowed to say PowerPoint slides?
100%.
The way PowerPoint slides are used is still not helping leaders.
Is that because you're putting too much information on one slide, or you're not because it's such a business tool to get a point across. I use them all the time. If we would leave that behind, what would we do instead?
So yes, it is. It's a business tool and it has become a written document, because what's expected of leaders is that they do a pre-pack before the board meeting or the senior leadership team meeting that gets submitted for reading. And then they're presenting from that same pack, and then it's used for post-reading as well if required. So that's a document, because when you're sending something for pre-reading, the reader needs to understand the message without you there. When you're there, you should be the lead in your message, not your PowerPoint slides. So I often work with senior leaders and say, yes, I understand we've got to create the pack. That's important. It's expected. You're going to have to pare that back for your presentation if you want to kill it in there, because you are so much more interesting than your slides, and you should be the lead in your message, and any tool you use, so I call PowerPoint a tool, should be the supporting cast. It should only be there if it's required to help you give your message or enhance that message for you, which means lots of imagery, maybe a little video snippet, and you don't have to have a slide for every single thing that you do. So one of the simplest things I teach leaders, which they think is the most brilliant thing they've ever heard, is to blank your slides out when you're not using them. So that is as easy as pressing B on your keyboard, or most clickers have a little button that will make them go black. And it completely shifts the room. If you don't have the attention of your room, do that, and everyone will sort of look at you like, oh, they've taken the big, bright, shiny object away from behind me. So yes, that would be one. And the second thing I would say is the word but. A lot of leaders will say, even if I think of town hall addresses where they want to give, the well done, we've had a great year,
But.
And I can tell you now, everyone in the room is only hearing the second thing that you say. So if you can shift but and use and instead, then it feels like everything you've just said is still true and relevant. And now we're building towards this as well. It's a completely different feeling. And it's really hard to teach yourself to do, because we're so programmed to say but.
And added to that is the that we use. Like, a lot of people fill space in because they're thinking, and so without even knowing it, they go How do you stop yourself from doing that?
I think it's a conscious thing. So one of the ways that you stop it is, if it's an actual presentation or speech, you rehearse, because once you know what's coming next, you won't need the ums. Your brain knows where it's going. It's when you don't know what's coming next that you automatically, as you said, go or It's okay to say a couple. as well. That's quite natural. It's what happens in our everyday speech when we're just having a conversation with someone. It's when it's repeated often that it becomes a problem. So pausing instead, but it's a conscious choice. You've got to sort of force yourself to do that through practicing doing it would be the one thing that I would recommend, because a few seconds pause really helps your audience hear what you've just said. It can feel like a lifetime to you sometimes, and it's not for the audience.
It's not. On the flip side, what's the skill set for the future that we need to master?
I think it's being as human as possible. And when I say human, I don't mean unrehearsed. So it's making sure you're putting the time aside to come across how you want to come across. So I would say to be the speaker you want to be, because the world's best speakers do not wing it.
No.
They do put the work in.
Very, very true. Now, if our listeners want to contact you, your business is Illuminated Story, very, very appropriate. What's the best way for leaders, anyone, to get in touch with you?
Yeah, if they go to the website illuminatedstory.com, then they'll see all of my details there and be able to make contact. There's a really great masterclass on the website as well, if they want to check that out, that really talks about blending those standard keynotes with the theatrical elements so you become unforgettable. And LinkedIn for leaders is definitely the best platform, Carmen Sederino, to connect with me. And my details are also on there.
Great. Carmen, thank you for joining us and sharing your knowledge in this space. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
If you like what you've heard, please share, rate and review this podcast. And don't forget to share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. The producer of Future Fit Leadership is Maritza Barone from Guide Your Light Network. If you would like to reach out to me, please DM me on any of my social media platforms. I'm available for speaking at conferences or consulting to your business. Future Fit is created in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives. If you'd like to join the community and receive a free takeaway each week, sign up to the Future Exchange app in my show notes. Thank you for having me in your space.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.